These past few days during Mass, we've been reading from the book of Genesis, and our focus has been on the story of Noah, the flood, the ark, and the rainbow. And I must confess, as I've been listening to this story, I find it to be a strange one. Now, I understand God's indictment of humanity. That's how it begins, with God looking around and saying, this is not what I created the world for. So I understand God's judgment. God had hoped to make creation his temple. And God created each of us in his image in order to extend his justice and peace and care out to all of creation. That was our fundamental vocation. But instead, we resisted and thwarted God's hopes for creation. We built a wicked world filled with systems that hurt, crush, and kill people while destroying large parts of God's creation. We seem to be interested in extending our influence, our violence, our power over all of creation, rather than God's presence. How often do our choices unleash the flood waters of chaos in our lives and in our worlds? So I understand God's judgment, and I understand the sentence God handed down at the time of Noah. I will wipe out all of creation. Filled with grief and regret, God decides to annihilate all creation. Except, as we know, that's not how the story ends. Instead, God found a way out of our destructiveness. God opened up a new future, leading to a new covenant with all creation. Despite our corrupt and evil betrayal of God's hope and creation itself, a new creation now becomes possible. With Noah and his family in the ark, the wind that blew over the waters at the beginning of Genesis now blow over the waters of the flood, bringing back the earth. And God says to Noah and his family what he said to Adam and Eve: be fruitful and multiply. The beginning of a new creation has occurred. Suddenly, God's sentence of annihilation has been replaced by an irreversible commitment to all creation when God promises never again. Let me repeat that. God's sentence of annihilation, God's decision to wipe out all of creation, has been replaced by God's commitment to us and to all of creation. So what happened? Why the drastic change in decrees? Well, it appears that the living God has a terrible time remembering sins. In Isaiah chapter 43, God says to Israel, I forgot your sins. In chapter 44, God says, I have forgotten your acts of revolt like a cloud. Their lawless deeds I remember no more. Your sins, they're like mist to me. You see, God seems to suffer from divine amnesia. It seems the holy cannot remember sins. So here's the good news. The good news is that the living God does not tie us down to our past. The living God doesn't hold grudges and keep track of every mistake and sin we make. The living God does not define us by our past. And boy, what a relief that is. I hope you can feel the relief that this brings. Now, the amazing news is that God decides to work with us and through us despite our evil and corrupt ways. God chose to work with Noah despite his problems with wine. God chose to work with Abraham, who we know lied. He worked with Moses, who did not want to work with God. God chose to work with David, and we know the problems he had. God chooses to work with you and with me. You see, the living God, the God that we worship, is not a God who's focused on the past. This is a God who's opening up a new future for us and all of creation through Jesus and the Spirit. I am doing something new, says the Lord. And he wants us to be a part of it. Amen.